There is growing concern over whether the gold at Fort Knox has gone missing. I'm Zach, I'm a certified public accountant, and I'm going to be breaking down the facts that suggest something is seriously wrong at Fort Knox. People want to know if the gold is still at Fort Knox. This could be done with an audit. We could hire independent accountants to go in and verify that the gold is still there. The last full audit was done in 1953, with a partial review in 1974. It has been 72 years since a full audit was done on the gold. It seems like a pretty reasonable concern that it is time to do another audit. But for some reason, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has been spending his first 100 days in office telling everyone that an audit is not necessary.
Question that everybody wants to know from the Treasury Department: is there actually still gold in Fort Knox?
We do an audit every year, so the audit that ended the year September 30th, 2024, all the gold is present and accounted for.
Okay, because this is something that people are apparently very concerned about. Elon Musk has been promising to verify that the gold is still there.
And I would invite any of the senators, especially your home state senator, Ron Johnson, who I'm a big fan of, that any senator, they call the Treasury, we're happy to arrange a visit, they can do an inspection.
Elon Musk, who's leading Doge, was talking about maybe going to Fort Knox to make sure those gold reserves are there. That comes under your purview. Do you have any plans to visit Kentucky?
I don't have any plans. I can tell you that we do an audit every year. I can tell the American people on camera right now that there was a report September 30th, 2024. All the gold is there. Any U.S. senator who wants to come and visit it can arrange a visit through our office.
Why is Scott Bessent lying about this? He says that an audit was done, but he's talking about the audit of the one-page accounting schedule. He knows that no one has audited the gold. We all know that no one has audited the gold. I do not understand why he cannot just admit that the gold has not been audited since 1953. This is a fact that everybody knows. Why is he lying about it? Why is Scott Bessent trying so hard to convince everyone not to go look at the gold? Don't look over here, people. There's nothing wrong. You should just trust the government. Does anybody think that's a good idea? Let's talk about what happened in 1953. Here's the text from the audit report in 1953 discussing the audit. The gold was kept in 22 sealed vaults. The audit only opened 3 of the vaults, or 13.6%. That was 88,000 bars. One of the concerns is that someone could have replaced the gold with iron bars that were covered in gold paint. So they took 26 bars at random and drilled holes from the top to the bottom of each bar to verify that they were solid gold. For an audit, you don't check every single bar of gold because you would never finish. But if you randomly check 13% and everything seems to be in order, you can have confidence that what is being reported is accurate. So 1953 was a good audit. The partial review in 1974 is looked at with a lot of skepticism. The Treasury allowed a number of politicians and journalists inside one of the vaults at Fort Knox. After the press event, the Treasury initiated an internal audit of themselves. They released this report claiming that all the gold was there. But the problem is that the audit was not independent. You cannot audit yourself and have people take it seriously. This is like the Treasury saying, "Don't worry, everyone, we checked ourselves. We promise that we're not stealing anything." It seems to me that is pretty suspicious. Since then, the Treasury has continued to perform internal checks of the gold and have stated that all the gold is there. Part of their reasoning is that each vault is sealed. This is a photo of one of the vaults. You can see the seal here. Once a vault has been counted and sealed, as long as it is never opened again, you don't have to audit it. We can assume all the gold is there. And this is one of the reasons why they never let anyone visit to look at the gold, because they don't want to break any of the seals. Here's testimony from Eric Thorson, the Inspector General for the Treasury, explaining how they seal the doors.
What you've got, as opposed, for instance, if I'm auditing inventory of a company, product goes out, product comes in, it's replaced, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, there is no movement. Those doors aren't opened. There is nothing there that can happen, because once those doors are sealed, and I've given you a couple of show and tell here examples, it's very obvious if those seals are ever broken. And it's not like, as I mentioned, in a normal audit where product is moved out and I replace it and I move on. That's not what happens here. There is no movement. Those doors are not opened, and if they are and a seal is broken, then those people who did it is replaced, the seal is put in place. So I guess it's hard to imagine what benefit there would be if, in fact, the seals that cover those doors are unbroken.
Well, it just seems like it doesn't conform to my idea of what an audit is all about. But
there is some logic to what he was saying, that if we never open the doors, we do not have to do an audit. But it turns out that he was lying. A journalist obtained this seal from one of the vaults at Fort Knox. You can see that this was a seal placed on a vault in 1976. It was removed in 1993. When the journalist asked why the seal was removed, he was sent this email from the Treasury which says, "I can tell you that the reason that gold had to be re-verified in some cases was because occasionally vault contents would have to be moved, and in each such case the bars would have to be recounted to assure full accountability." So we have verification that the Treasury was opening the vaults and moving gold around for who knows what reason. Not only that, this proves that the Inspector General was lying under oath. They were breaking the seals. So, the Inspector General was lying, now Scott Bessent is lying. Why can't we get an audit of the gold? Let us not forget that Scott Bessent used to work for George Soros. That's right, the same George Soros who is the #1 donor for the Democrat Party. Scott Bessent worked for him for decades. He had a pivotal role in George Soros's famous trade when he bet against the British pound in 1992 and famously broke the Bank of England. Scott Bessent was then promoted to become the chief investment officer of Soros Fund Management. This is what makes his lies so frustrating, because Scott Bessent has worked with currencies. He knows all about the gold at Fort Knox and why it is important. So it is extremely suspicious when it seems like Scott Bessent is preventing this audit. Is he even on Donald Trump's side? Or is he on the side of George Soros? If you were to pick up the phone and call the accountants at the top accounting firms, I am telling you they would be more than happy to help with this audit. This is the reason why we have accountants in society, because they are very good at solving problems like this. You could even put together an elite team of accountants from multiple top firms, and they could pull off this audit in record time at minimal cost. If the public is going to take any audit seriously, it needs to have two things. Number one, open up all the vaults. We know from the 1953 audit that there are 22 vaults at Fort Knox. You need to open all of them and at least look inside to do a visual check that none of them are empty. Number two, independent auditors. You need someone from an outside firm so the government is not auditing themselves. Let's take a step back and look at the timeline, because there are a lot more problems with Fort Knox than Scott Bessent acting suspicious. In 1933, people started hoarding gold during the Great Depression, which was making the economic situation worse. Democrat President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, or FDR, ordered the confiscation of everyone's gold in the U.S. If you had any gold coins or gold bars, you had to turn them over to the government or you would be sentenced to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. It is estimated that between 20 to 25% of Americans complied and turned in their gold. This happened 92 years ago. This is why the Fort Knox audit is so emotionally charged. A lot of the gold in Fort Knox is not the government's gold. It belongs to the American people. The Democrats told everyone, just give all your gold to the government. We'll take care of it for you. This will help us get out of the Depression. Just trust the government, guys. There are probably people who are still alive today who were children when they watched their parents turn in their gold. So it is extremely offensive that the government took everyone's gold and now refuses to do an audit. That is our gold. What do you mean you refuse to do an audit? Once the Democrats had gotten their hands on everyone's gold, they needed somewhere to put it, so they built Fort Knox in 1936. FDR served 4 terms as president and was followed by Republican President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Eisenhower was famous as the U.S. general in charge of the military in Europe during World War II. He was the president who first decided to audit Fort Knox in 1953. A big part of his decision was political. He felt that since the Democrats had been in power for so long, that it was a good idea to just check to see if all the gold was there. If Eisenhower thought that was a good reason in 1953, it seems to me that it is an even better reason today. When we just had Joe Biden as president, with a lot of evidence that he was involved in alleged criminal activity with his son Hunter, shouldn't we be checking to see if the gold is still all there? Then in 1963, JFK was assassinated. He was replaced by his vice president, Lyndon B. Johnson. There are still a lot of questions around who was behind the assassination of JFK, but there is growing consensus that the CIA and Lyndon Johnson were at least aware and potentially involved in the murder. The implication is that Lyndon Johnson killed JFK to become president. There's no direct evidence of this, but someone named Madeline Brown, who claimed to be Lyndon Johnson's mistress, wrote in a book that the night before the assassination, Lyndon Johnson told her, "After tomorrow, those damned Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat. That's a promise." The reason why all of this is important is that shortly after JFK was killed, people started hearing reports that gold at Fort Knox had gone missing. At this time, the US dollar was backed by gold. The US had made an agreement with the central banks of 8 different countries to participate in the London gold pool. When necessary, the US would send gold to the Bank of England to sell on the London gold market to stabilize the price of gold. Here's a copy of the accounting records from the US Treasury of gold shipments from US Bullion Depository, Fort Knox, Kentucky. So we know from this document that from 1961 to 1988, 219.5 million troy ounces of gold left Fort Knox. The bulk of this, 210.2 million ounces, went to the New York Assay Office. The Assay Office is where you would test the quality of the gold before it is sent abroad. But we know that only 45.2 million ounces of gold was sold in the London market through the pool arrangement. That leaves 165 million ounces unaccounted for. That was $69 billion of gold at the time. At today's gold prices, that would be hundreds of billions of dollars. What happened to that gold, and why is there no record of it after it left Fort Knox? Now, there was an investigation into what happened to the $69 billion of missing gold. The investigation was handled by the Treasury Department, and they determined that they did nothing wrong. This was their official response. We contend that the gold was not stolen. There is no cover-up. They have misinterpreted our books. The gold was being refined into better quality gold, and those ounces just went up the chimney. This is ludicrous. If gold is melted down and refined, you only lose between less than 0.1 to 0.5% of the total weight. There is no way that $69 billion of gold would have just vanished in the refining process. In addition to this, we know there were problems at the New York Assay Office. The New York Daily News reported in 1978 that $1.1 million worth of gold was reported missing from the New York Assay Office. There was another investigation by the Treasury Department. Do you know what the outcome was? They said they just could not tell what happened. If gold was walking out the doors of the New York Assay Office, how do we know it did not happen before? Then there were more suspicious things happening at Fort Knox. Do you remember this list of shipments of gold from Fort Knox? We know that there were additional secret shipments of gold that were not recorded in the accounting records. There are photographs that were published in the newspaper of 4 tractor-trailer loads of gold that left Fort Knox on January 20th, 1965. That shipment is missing from the accounting records. This shipment was confirmed by the Mint director, who said, on January 20th, 1965, 1,762,381.353 fine ounces of gold from the Fort Knox Bullion Depository was shipped via rail from Jeffersonville, Indiana, to the United States Assay Office, New York, New York. What was this shipment? Where did it go? Why was it left off the accounting records? And why do all these shady things seem to happen at the Assay Office in New York? Then in 1971, the U.S. went off the gold standard. This was driven by foreign countries, mainly in Europe, who began exchanging their dollars for gold at an accelerating pace. This was a run on the U.S. gold reserves, based on a fear that the U.S. might not have enough gold to honor all their claims. So the U.S. simply stopped converting dollars into gold by going off the gold standard. I wonder why all these European countries started suddenly thinking that there is not as much gold in Fort Knox as the U.S. claims. All of this was followed by the phony internal government audit by the Treasury in 1974. So let us go back to the timeline. 1933, everyone's gold was confiscated by the government. 1953, the first audit was performed. 1963, JFK was assassinated. 1960s, $69 billion of gold goes missing. 1965, photographs of undocumented shipments from Fort Knox. 1971, the U.S. goes off the gold standard. I don't know about you, but I do not think it is a coincidence that all these shipments of gold just happen to go missing right after JFK gets assassinated. If Lyndon Johnson was somehow involved in killing JFK, is it possible that the missing gold was actually blackmail payments to continue the cover-up? If Lyndon Johnson was willing to kill in order to become president, why wouldn't he give away America's gold in order to hold on to power? It seems really suspicious that all of these investigations by the Treasury never seem to turn up anything. But wait, there's more. According to this timeline, a lot of the gold started going missing around 1965. Do you know what else happened in 1965? Lyndon Johnson appointed a new Secretary of the Treasury named Henry Fowler. This is important. Henry Fowler was a lawyer. Now, this is strange, and it surprised a lot of people at the time. Lyndon Johnson did not choose an accountant. He did not choose a banker. He chose a lawyer to run the Treasury. Why would he do that? It turns out it was not just any lawyer. Henry Fowler previously represented the federal government on the controversial case Ashwander v. Tennessee Valley Authority. He basically steamrolled over shareholders in the local power utility, allowing the federal government to assert control. Henry Fowler then went on to work as the director of the Office of Defense Mobilization, who was in charge of military transportation. So out of all the people Lyndon Johnson could have chosen to run the Treasury, he selected this shady lawyer whose limited experience involved having an in-depth knowledge of the truck transportation available at Fort Knox. If Lyndon Johnson was trying to steal the gold at Fort Knox, this is precisely the type of person you would appoint at the Treasury to do it. When Henry Fowler left the Treasury in 1969, He was given a lucrative job as a chairman at Goldman Sachs in charge of the fixed income, currency, and commodities division, the same division dealing with gold. I hope you are starting to realize that there are very real reasons to ask for an audit of Fort Knox. This is not just being suspicious of the government. These are real facts about what happened. It is a fact that $69 billion of gold went missing. It is a fact that train cars full of gold left Fort Knox and were not recorded in the accounting records. We need to have an audit of the gold at Fort Knox. And I think it is outrageous that Scott Bessent continues to ignore this issue. How dare he? That gold belongs to Americans. How dare he dismiss these concerns? How dare he pretend that this isn't important? I do not understand why he is not listening to the American people. I demand an explanation from Scott Bessent. I want to know why he refuses to do an audit and why he continues to lie about it. I think it is also important that the Bank of England seems to be involved in a lot of this. They received a lot of the gold shipments from Fort Knox. As we all know, Charles III is the King of England. The reason I bring this up is because guess who is a good personal friend of King Charles? Scott Bessent. In fact, they are such good friends that Camilla, the Queen Consort, stayed at Scott Bessent's home in 1999 during her first solo trip to the US. I just want to emphasize this. They are such good friends that the King of England lets his wife sleep at Scott Bessent's house. That is a pretty close friend. Now let me ask you this question. Would you let your wife sleep over at any of your friends' houses? Personally, I think it is kind of strange, but what do you think? But this is more than just one trip. When Scott Bessent is in England, he often attends private fundraisers at the Royal Palace. It makes you wonder, who is Scott Bessent more loyal to? Donald Trump or his buddy, King Charles? I'm just betting that Donald Trump would not let Melania sleep over at Scott Bessent's house. There have been a lot of scandals with the royal family. Charles's brother, Andrew, was involved in the court case over sex crimes on Jeffrey Epstein's island. The most vocal witness, Virginia Giuffre, has just died. Earlier this year, she was almost killed after being hit by a bus. Now it has been reported that she committed suicide. I don't know about you, but I think this is all a little suspicious. This is her father right after her death.
First of all, tell me about your reaction when you heard that she'd taken her life.
Well, first of all, I couldn't even believe it. I started crying right away. I'm still crying. I can't believe that this is happening. It's impossible. And then for them to say that she committed suicide, there's no way that she did. Somebody got to her.
He says that somebody got to her. It sounds to me like spiritual warfare is going on. Now, I know some of you are going to roll your eyes and say, Zach, why are you bringing religion into this? Just wait until you listen to this. Not long ago, King Charles revealed his official painting, and it was this bizarre red image that seems a little creepy. Something just seems a little off and unsettling about this image. Am I alone in this? Do any of you find this creepy? Let me show you something. If you take the picture and you duplicate it, and then you line it up, and then you flip it around, you start to see an image that is hidden in the background. Do you see it? Look a little closer. It is an image of Satan hidden in the painting of King Charles. I have a hard time believing that is a coincidence. Is it possible that King Charles is using stolen American gold to fund a satanic sex ring all around the world? Now, I cannot verify whether this is true or not. But what I do know for sure is that we should be doing an audit of the gold at Fort Knox. There are really evil people in this world that are capable of horrible crimes. We have not done a real audit of Fort Knox since 1953. Why are we not checking to see if all the gold is there? And I also want to know, why is Scott Bessent such a good friend with the creepy King of England? Is Scott Bessent involved in a global satanic sex ring with his buddy? Is he being coerced? Is he being blackmailed? Is he a traitor? Why is Scott Bessent doing everything in his power to keep from auditing Fort Knox? Now I want to hear from you. Do you think we should audit Fort Knox? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos. If you found this video helpful, consider signing up for a membership on my website, wolvesandfinance.com. For $6 a month, your support helps me to keep making these videos. Thank you to everyone who has signed up. I'm Zach from Wolves and Finance. Thank you for watching.